I know a lot of us don't really like ESPN anymore, but I do enjoy recruiting rankings, and ESPN put out their latest 300 top 300 for 2024. So Jimmy and I are going to talk about it.
Locked On Bama, your daily podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey again, everybody, and welcome back into Locked On Bama. Luke Robinson, that's me. Jimmy Stein, that's him. Jimmy, today, ESPN, without consulting us at all, decided to release their new top 300 for 2024, and it's got a few surprises in there.
All right, and they are?
I was going to give you a chance to riff, but I guess...
Well, first of all, ESPN does a good job. It's an extremely difficult thing to do is rank, and it's so early. I know people are like, what do you mean it's early? We're recruiting these 2024 guys right now. Yeah, but, I mean, in terms of what you've had to evaluate on, there's not a lot. It is early. There's several things that juggle the rankings. And the first one coming up is a May evaluation period when coaches hit the road and opinions change when coaches see these kids in person. That's going to juggle things. Summer camps, when these kids go to camps, both at schools, and then things like the Nike camps and Elite 11 and all those camps. And the 7-on-7 national tournaments are a big thing now with the rankings, to say nothing of an entire senior season. And then the national, all of those things reshuffle the rankings each time it happens. But that said, it's not like the rankings aren't interesting now. And it's not like I think all the services, particularly the one I work for, On3, do a fantastic job with what they have to work with. I equate it to the draft all the time because it really is analogous and makes sense. And let's say, hey, signing day is December, right? And now it's April. So we're 8 months out. 8 months before the NFL draft is August. What do McShay and Kuiper's boards look like in August? And what do they look like now? So that's the same thing with the recruiting rankings. They're going to change, and it's going to be a lot of changes. On the other hand, some things like Bryce Young and Will Anderson in the draft, some things in recruiting are pretty obvious. And I think ESPN has Dylan R. Raiola. I always say Raiola, but I don't know. I say Dylan Raiola, but we're not involved with him. Alabama's not. So I don't really know because we've never really been involved with him. We identified Julian Sayin very early and jumped on Sayin, and it paid off because Sayin is deeply committed, and he's probably, in my opinion, maybe the top quarterback in this class. You certainly wouldn't have him out of the top 3 or 4.
Well, it's funny you say that because to me, that was one of the things that was a bit of a surprise. They had Julian saying, I think in the top 25, maybe top 30 before, and now they move him all the way to number 8 player in the country. So he is the second rated quarterback in the country behind Dylan Raiola. And the other things, I'm going to run down some just notes in this top 10. They have Jalen Mbakwe, the number 2 player in the country. Okay, I love Jalen Mbakwe. They have him higher than most everybody else. I'm cool with it. I think Jalen Mbakwe is awesome, and I'm super happy to have him committed to the University of Alabama. They also have Mike Matthews, who Alabama's looking at, coveting as well as everybody else coveting him. Mike Matthews from Lilburn, Georgia. They have Ellis Robinson, the cornerback that it really came down to Alabama and Georgia, I think, and he committed to Georgia. Right. David Stone, who I know Alabama would like to have, out of Bradenton, Florida, at IMG Academy, the top-rated defensive lineman. Then they have a guy named Colin Simmons. I haven't heard him associated with Alabama. I guess he could be, but he's a defensive.
Yeah, he is. We're recruiting him.
Okay. Then here's where my first surprise hits. Cameron Coleman, who this guy right here, this guy pointing at himself, has been extraordinarily high on.
Yes.
Would I say that I think he's the 7th best player in the country? I don't know about that, but I would put him
high cotton. That's high cotton.
That is definitely high cotton, but he is number 7. He is the number 1. Well, excuse me. Yeah, I guess he is the number one rated wide receiver because they have Mike Matthews as an athlete, and I think most people consider Mike Matthews a receiver.
I consider him a receiver. I mean, I guess he's on some athlete list because he could play a bunch of spots. But yeah, to me, Mike Matthews is just a flat out receiver.
So then they have Julian Sayin right after him at number 8. Josiah Trader, who Alabama I know has been on. Most people think he ends up at Ohio State, I believe.
Yeah.
They have him at number 9. Williams Narani out of Lee Summit, Missouri.
Well said.
Have we been involved with him that you know of?
Not that I know of, but
Okay.
I mean, I'm sure to some extent. I'm sure to some extent, and it's early, but that's not a name you hear too often with Alabama.
And then Micah Hudson, who is going to be visiting Alabama, I think sometime soon, is he not?
Yeah, really soon. Maybe even this weekend or this weekend or A-Day, something. He's a priority for sure. So many.
He's number 11. So what I find interesting, if you consider Mike Matthews a wide receiver, not an athlete, like you and I consider him a wide receiver, that would be 4 wide receivers in the top 11 players of the country for ESPN. That's pretty doggone good.
Yeah, deep season there. There's a few things. It's early, but there's a few things I've already picked up on nationally with this class. And number one is it's a great class nationally for wide receivers and corners. There seems to be a lot more wide receivers and corners, even wide receiver DBs, than there normally is. It's a heavy and it's a poor season offensive line wise. There's not a lot of offensive linemen nationally even that seem super elite or like high end SEC takes. And I say that as it doesn't seem to be a good year in state for offensive linemen. If you're Alabama, it's not a good year regionally. It's not a good year nationally. It's kind of barren at that spot, but wide receiver and cornerback, they're coming out of the woodwork. Running back is also good. And just general athletes. One that I read about just today that's visiting this Saturday, Terry Bussey from East Texas. Wow, he's going to visit this weekend. He's on three's number 1 athlete because different schools are looking at him at different positions. He's a number 1 athlete in the country. He's from East Texas, maybe a Texas A&M lean, but he's pretty open right now. He's going to visit Alabama this Saturday. I wish I knew all these numbers off the top of my head, Luke, because this sounds like I'm making it up because this sounds impossible. But like as a quarterback, he threw for like over 2,000 yards. As back/quarterback in terms of rushing from the quarterback position and also playing running back, he ran for 2,000 yards. On defense, in his spare time, 115 tackles and 5 interceptions. So it's a decent night's work for Terry Bussey, who's 5'10", 180. So A&M, again, early lean there, but he's visiting Alabama Saturday, and he seems pretty excited. He's never been to Tuscaloosa. Pretty excited. I'm sure Alabama's going to tell him we'd love to have him back for an official visit, and in particular camp this summer. But, yeah, that's an interesting name that they're on 3 and Bama Insider was able to report today will be visiting on Saturday.
When we come back, I want to talk more about what ESPN said about some guys like Julian Sayin, Cameron Coleman, and one more guy out of the state of Alabama. You mentioned running backs. I'm going to talk about that in a second. Right now, I want to tell you about FanDuel. Grand slams, no hitters, double plays, they're all back, and there's no better place to get in on the MLB action than FanDuel, America's number 1 sportsbook. That's because right now, new customers can step up to the plate with a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, sign up, and place your bet, and get up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if you don't win. What bets should you make for baseball? Well, you can pick any of them. Will the Braves win? Will the Braves preempt Space Giants, like I talked about in my previous podcast? Will somebody hit a home run or not? Will there be over-under on strikeouts? Whatever it is, you can do it at FanDuel. So don't miss your chance to get that no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. When you join FanDuel today, just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, official sports partner of the Major League Baseball. As always, thanks for making us your first listen. We appreciate you guys a ton. Boy, I'll tell you, I was on a Montgomery station really quickly today, like I am on every Wednesday. and they were talking about, hey, well, just talk about Locked On Bama. Do you guys discuss everything? And I said, well, we were. For a long time, we kind of discussed everything. Then we realized most everybody just wants football. Now, if we work in some basketball talk, everybody's cool with it. You and I love basketball. We're cool with it. We love Alabama. So, I mean, if baseball's doing well, we'll mention it or whatever. Like they got a big series with Auburn coming up this weekend, but neither Bama nor Auburn is very good this year, apparently. I mean, you tilt your head because I know you almost take offense to it. I get it. But
they're both in the NCAA tournament as of today. As of today. Now, both could play their way out.
So?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're both in. Alabama's a 2 seed right now. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 16 regionals, 4 teams in each regional. So there's a 1, a 2, a 3, and a 4. So 1 means you're badass and hosting the regional. 2 means you are a high level at large. 3 means you're either a good mid-major that won their conference tournament or a powerful team that barely slipped in. And 4s are all the mid-majors that won their conference tournament that aren't really super great teams. But
taking up our football time. You know that.
Oh, yeah. That's great.
Told you what people want to listen to. Nobody wants you to explain the baseball NCAA tournament.
They could be interested that Alabama's good enough to make the NCAA tournament. Maybe. But,
right.
hey,
okay.
Maybe.
Okay. We'll deal with that at a later date.
Yes.
But I did want to talk a little about what ESPN had to say about they had an article about the top 300, just posting the 300. And then they talked about some of the guys that are new 5-stars. And they talk about David Stone. He doesn't have ESPN doesn't have him listed involved with Alabama. Now, that doesn't mean they are. I mean, again, it's so early. But here's what they said about Cameron Coleman. Coleman showed his impressive blend of size, speed, and strength and body control when Central Phoenix City played on ESPN's High School Football Showcase last fall. Coach Patrick Nix, yes, that one that played at Auburn, who's also a former Georgia Tech offensive coordinator, compared him to one of his former wide receivers, Pro Football Hall of Famer Calvin Johnson. They're calling him Mini Megatron. He's 6'4", 185 pounds. He's got a 4.48 40, and he had an impressive performance at this spring's Under Armour Atlanta camp, earning MVP. It says he's associated with Bama, Clemson, Florida State, LSU, and Auburn, and then they have a little highlight. Now about Julian Sayin, they say Sayin didn't necessarily need to show up to the Under Armour Los Angeles camp. After all, he has been a productive starter since his freshman year at Carlsbad High School. And he's also landed several offers. But the Alabama commit showed up wanting to compete and measure himself against others similar to his QB predecessors in Tuscaloosa. In doing so, he proved why he's worthy of a 5th star. So he was previously number 24, according to ESPN, and now he's moved up to number 8. 6'2", 190 pounds. I think 6'2" might be a bit of a stretch. I don't know, Jimmy. Do you think I'm wrong there? Do you think he's actually
he's a late grower.
Okay.
I think at the time he committed, or slightly before that, I think there might have been. Well, he's not the biggest guy in the world, but he's probably legit 6'2" now.
Okay. Well, here's another guy that's on the list. He's number 16 now. Now, this guy I know has been associated with Alabama. I know I would love to have him. Jamonte Waller. Is that how I say it, or Jamonta?
Not sure. I just call him Waller from Mississippi.
Jay Waller.
Yeah, okay. He's from Mississippi, right? He's the defensive player.
He was unranked, Jimmy, on ESPN, and now he's number 16 player in the country.
Well, just a good example of why the earlier the list, the less credence you should put in it.
Let me stop you. You know what that reminds me of? Do you remember when Chris Jones was at Mississippi, and Mississippi State got a commitment from him? Everybody had him like a 3-star. And I remember watching him at the Alabama-Mississippi All-Star. I said, this guy's the best guy on the field. He's the best player on the field. And he ended up being a 5-star just about everywhere. He's still signed with Mississippi State, which is unbelievable. But, he was crazy good. And that's what Waller sort of reminds me of.
It's hard to hide kids these days. I mean, there used to be hidden kids. There used to be colleges would find a kid and the college and the high school would work to keep the kid's profile low. That happened in the 60s, 70s, 80s. That absolutely doesn't happen anymore. Chris Jones is one of the last guys I'm ever going to think of when I think, can you hide a 5-star anymore? Yeah, I mean, I think Chris Jones was it. The first time I saw Chris Jones, the first time I saw his film, I thought it had been mislabeled. Because, no, I watched his film for the first time and I thought, That's a 5-star. That kid is nothing but a 5-star. Any coach that watches that would go, that's one of the top 30 prospects in the United States. And he was a 3-star late in the process in Mississippi. And I literally thought that I think somebody put another kid's film in. That can't be Chris Jones, 3-star from Mississippi. And look at him now. He's one of the best players in the NFL.
Here's one that might take you back a minute. They talk about they had that classman, the new 5-stars, and they had biggest movers, right? Big risers. One of the biggest risers was state of Alabama's own Kevin Riley,
Big
who
fan.
went from 214 to number 61. Riley is both patient and sudden at the same time. It took us until the offseason to really appreciate his skill set. In watching him, he is so light on his feet that he appears like he's running on his tiptoes and can still stop and start on a dime. He has a great feel for seeing the crease and then exploding through the hole. Riley is capable of making multiple people miss in space. The 5'11", 200-pound running back, he will need to develop in the weight room to become a more powerful runner, but his big play ability is excellent. The schools recruiting Riley, the hardest, are Bama, Georgia, Tennessee, and Ole Miss.
Yeah, I'm not shy about saying I think that a great outcome for Alabama this cycle with recruiting running backs, a great outcome is signing 2. And I'm talking about my first picks in terms of like realistic. Now there's other guys that are better prospect, but I think this would be a great outcome for Alabama. Kevin Riley from Tuscaloosa County and Daniel Hill from Meridian, Mississippi, because they're 2 way different styles that will both be effective, but a heck of a duo down the road. Daniel Hill, big, physical, chain mover, first downs. Think Brian Robinson. Okay, but I think that's a good – some people say Derrick Henry. I think that's just going too far and expecting too much. But I see Daniel Hill as like Brian Robinson, and I see Kevin Riley as like Kenyon Drake almost, or Gibbs to an extent, Josh Jacobs to an extent. Kevin Riley's more of a home run hitter, and Daniel Hill's a big chain mover. So I love them as a duo. And I think either one would be capable of being a number 1 back at Alabama. But what I really like is, you do it by committee these days. That's how the NFL does it. That's how Nick Saban's done it at Alabama. When you're doing it by committee, I personally like having different styles, and it's not the same exact carbon copy of a back every time out. It's just different backs. And I love the idea that Alabama could sign 2 local kids in Kevin Riley and Daniel Hill, who's only an hour and a half away in Meridian.
Then they bring up Jaquan McCroy. They have him listed at Fairfield High School, but he's at Clay Chalkville, isn't he?
That's Clay Chalkville. Yeah, it's not Fairfield, I don't think.
Well, okay. They say Fairfield High School, and they say in Fairfield, Alabama, but they say, and he's not at Fairfield. He's at Clay Chalkville, isn't he?
To me, it's Clay Chalkville. I don't think we've offered him.
We have not. I'm just saying he's on the list at number 57 as a big riser. I mean, he's a big kid, 6'8", 360 pounds.
Yeah, that kid is. I know what you're talking about. Yeah. I think Auburn and maybe Tennessee.
Yeah, and Arkansas.
Yeah.
I just thought it was interesting that they have him so high.
That's a massive kid. You would think Alabama would be really – put it this way, Alabama loves these big, massive kids, but we hadn't really taught to him much. So he's definitely going to be a come-to-camp guy for Alabama. Real interesting that ESPN would have him that high. Yeah. I do know this about him. Auburn and Tennessee both really like him. I mean, I think Auburn and Tennessee are like hitting the gas for him where Alabama's more hitting the brake. That's just my interpretation.
And then finally, they have Aaron Nolan, who just committed to Ohio State. They moved him way up the board. He's number 47. I'm not even sure if he was ranked before because it didn't say a previous ranking for him, right. But they got him at number 47. I just think it's interesting because he was associated with Alabama very late in the process. But we all knew with Julian Sayin coming here, we weren't getting
right. I think had Sayin not been committed, Aaron Nolan would have committed to Alabama.
Okay. Well,
I think Sayin bunch in Alabama has either a preference or, hey, Sayin committed first. And they're both really good prospects. but I like saying more myself. I like them both. And if saying does flip, which you never know, it's NIL landscape out there. You never know. If saying flips, I think Aaron Nolan, even though he's committed to Ohio State, his phone's going to ring. There'll be a Tuscaloosa 334 area code there.
334 in Tuscaloosa, though, is it?
Hell if I know. I never call myself here.
Somebody's calling him from Montgomery? All right. Anyway. All right. Let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk a little basketball transfer portal news. And we're back. In some news that revolves around Alabama basketball, how about Medea goes in the transfer portal as Tyler Perry from North Texas is in
where are you going with that? That's good.
Well, what's funny is he spells his name Tyler, and that's why I said it like that. Tylor, not Tyler Perry. So he's going to be visiting Alabama this weekend. He was Conference USA Player of the Year. Really good player. I would love to have him. I think North Texas won didn't they win the NIT? Didn't they beat UAB for the NIT championship?
I only know one thing about North Texas. Ready for this? This is a good one. There's a famous music star, globally famous, certainly nationally famous, but pretty globally famous music star that went to school at North Texas. You know who that is?
Ariana Grande.
That's a good answer for whenever I ask a musician question, though. You know me well, but no, not little Ari, as I call her.
Yeah.
A little older than Ari.
Her sister, Guinevere Grande.
What a cool name.
Starbucks.
Nora Jones. Nora Jones.
Okay.
Nora Jones went to North Texas. I mean, that's a pretty big shock. I think a lot of people identify her with New York City, but yeah, she's mean green, just like Tyler Perry. Yeah, they probably know each other.
Well, they're probably fans of one another, sure. But so he's going to be here. BJ Mack will be here this weekend, the transfer from Wofford. Then he's going to visit Iowa on Sunday. I mean, I feel pretty good about Alabama's chances. Hey, why don't you come to Tuscaloosa, and hang out with us downtown? Maybe we'll hit the strip a little bit on Saturday night. And then Sunday you can go to Iowa. And I'm sure you'll have corn casserole along with cornbread and maybe corn cob pipe. I mean, I can't imagine anything more boring than Iowa on a Sunday.
I guess. I wouldn't know. I'll let you get all the mean tweets from the Locked On Hawkeyes.
I'm teasing Iowa people. I love Iowa. I've been there several times. It's really fine. It's really great. It's underrated.
Field of Dreams.
It is. But I feel good about Alabama's chances there. So, and there's other dudes that are in the portal still that Alabama's looking at. I still looking, and the portal keeps growing and growing and growing. Some dude from Syracuse just got in, a center from Syracuse. I mean, Jimmy, I don't even know how we're supposed to keep up with all this. I mean, I know
over 20%. Over 20% of all scholarship college basketball players are in the portal.
That's just not. That's so against the spirit of what this is, and it's. I think it's really bad for just the future of society in general. I mean,
it's not good for anyone. It's not good for anyone.
It's not good for the kid. It really is teaching just when things get tough, get out of there, or leave as soon as a little bit of more money comes around.
Yeah, I think NIL drives most of it. Now, it's not fair. I'll say this. There was a transfer epidemic in college basketball before they even made before the portal was a thing. There was a basketball transfer epidemic, and it had been going on. But I think all that's happened to drive this completely out of control is NIL. I think that's been the jet fuel added to an already burning fire. There's a fire. Now we've doused jet fuel on it.
What if we made scholarships, they're an annual thing, right? Like you get re-upped every year. It's not a 4-year contract or anything. It's a single year contract, right? That's what a scholarship is, right?
Sure.
What if we said athletic scholarships are 2-year contracts? And we said, okay, here's the deal. If you sign with us, now you can leave to go pro. If you go pro after a year, I mean, they'll probably get rid of the one and done anyway. So, I mean, there'll be some kids that go out of high school. But I'm saying if you leave to go pro, so be it. But if you want to go to another school after your freshman year, no matter the circumstance, if you got a sick aunt, if you've got a cousin that needs your help, whatever, it doesn't matter what the circumstance is. You cannot transfer and play immediately after 1 year. You can do it after 2. Because I think at least that would make some kids stick around and think harder about where they commit to in the first place. And it benefits them, by the way, because it makes it so coaches can't say, hey, you're not the player I thought you were. We're letting you go. You're not going to play here. They have to be here 2 years too. So both schools are tethered to one another. I mean, both school and player are tethered to one another.
Any system like that's better than the one we got now.
Yeah, the system we have now sucks. And again, I'm all for players getting paid. I'm all for players being able to transfer. The spirit of this thing has been raked over the coals. But regardless, that's a discussion for another day. Jimmy, I still want to do our all Saban draft. We're going to do that in the next week, I hope. So be thinking about your draft.
I think about the draft all the time.
All right.
But the other one. The Mel Kiper one.
Okay. So you think about Mel Kiper a lot. That's interesting.
I do. Me, Mel, Ari.
North Texas.
Jones.
Anyway, okay. That's going to do it for today's podcast. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We appreciate y'all putting up with our nonsense. And we will be back tomorrow at some point. Until then, roll tide, everybody.
Roll Tide.